Hello everyone. Welcome to the 6th video of the distance learning program. I hope all of you are practicing social distancing, and I hope you and your family are well and safe. The focus of this lesson is going to be clauses and phrases with the word because. And to start out, I'd like to do a warm-up by asking you a few questions, and you can think about how you would answer these questions. The first question is from our last lesson, and that was the conversation between Anna and Maria about the smoke alarm. The first question is Anna worried? Is Anna worried? You would say, yes, she is. If you wanted to answer that with a short answer, you would say, yes, she is. The next question is, why is Anna worried? A short answer would be, because her smoke alarm is going off. Because her smoke alarm is going off. Now, that is a because clause. When you say because her smoke alarm is going off, that would be a because clause. The next question, what is Anna doing? What is Anna doing? You could say calling Maria. Calling Maria. Why is Anna calling Maria? Because she wants to borrow Maria's ladder. Again, we have a because clause. Why couldn't Maria and Daniel sleep last night? Because their neighbors were noisy. Because their neighbors were noisy. And again, that's another answer that's a because clause. Because their neighbors were noisy. So for this lesson, we're going to discuss clauses and phrases that use the word because. Now, if you'll turn in your books to page 34 in the Ventures3 book, page 34, you can see lesson B, clauses and phrases with because. Part 1 says grammar focus, because clauses, and because of phrases. Use a because clause or because of phrase to give an explanation for something. And an explanation is a reason for something, a reason why something happens. Use because in a clause with a subject and a verb. Remember, an independent clause is a clause that has a subject and a verb, and it can stand alone as a sentence. But a phrase is not able to stand alone as a sentence. A phrase does not have a subject and a verb. Remember, all sentences have to have a subject and a verb unless it's an imperative where it's a command. Use because of before a noun to make a phrase. So when you have because of, then it's followed by a noun, and that makes a phrase. But if you have a subject and a verb, then it's a clause. And you don't use of when you're using because in a clause. It's just because and then a subject and a verb. So a because plus a clause, that means that the reason is because, and then you're going to have a subject and then a verb, okay? So the first box says Anna can't reach the smoke alarm because the ceiling is too high. The ceiling is the noun and is the verb. So that's a clause. So because plus the clause is a because clause, okay? The second example says because the ceiling is too high, Anna can't reach the smoke alarm. Notice that when the because and the clause come at the beginning of the sentence, it's followed by a comma. But if because clause comes at the end of the sentence, there is no comma. So just remember, when because plus the clause comes at the beginning of the sentence, you follow it with a comma, but if it comes at the end of the sentence, there is no comma. Now we're going to look at because of plus a noun phrase. So this is going to be without the subject and the verb. It's just going to be because of and a noun. It says, Anna can't reach the smoke alarm because of the high ceiling. Notice there's no verb. So you say because of, and then the noun, which is the high ceiling. Next, because of the high ceiling, comma, Anna can't reach the smoke alarm. So now the because plus the noun phrase, that comes at the beginning of the sentence. You follow it with a comma. But when it comes at the end of the sentence, there is no comma. Also, you need to pay attention to what this blue box says right here. It says useful language. When you read aloud, pause when you see a comma. Because of the high ceiling, and then there's a pause, Anna can't reach the smoke alarm. You wouldn't just read this by saying, because of the high ceiling, Anna can't reach the smoke alarm, because then there's no pause. So after you see the word ceiling, there's a comma. That tells you that you need to take a short pause before you continue. So hopefully you see that the because plus the clause means that you have because and then a subject and a verb. Because when you use the because of plus a noun phrase, there is no verb. It's just because of and then a noun. Okay? Now, the next part, we're going to try to put this into practice. You need to try to decide, do you use because or because of? And it's really easy. All you have to remember is that when you use because of, the only words that come after that would be maybe an adjective and a noun. But if you use because without the of, which is a preposition, of is a preposition, that means that you're going to follow it with a subject and a verb. So it's going to be pretty easy to fill in the blanks. So let's do part 2. It says, Leigh wanted to bake a cake because it was her neighbor Margie's birthday. It was. That's a subject and a verb, so there is no of. Leigh needed to go to the store blank. She didn't have any flour. Well, this is pretty easy to see that she is the subject and didn't is the verb. So there would be no of, and you would just say because. However, her car had a flat tire. She probably got the flat tire because her tires were very old. You see, her tires would be the subject and were is the verb. So you don't have the word of. Number 4, blank this problem. Well, this problem is only a noun. So therefore, you'd start out that sentence with because of, because you're following it with just a noun. So it would be a because plus noun phrase. I'm sorry, because of plus noun phrase. Next, it says, she couldn't walk to the store, blank the distance. Well, distance is just a noun, so you would use because of in number 5. So it would be because of the distance. Number 6, it says, it was more than a mile away. Leigh had a clever idea. She went to Margie and asked to borrow a cup of flour. Margie was happy to help, blank, she had a lot of flour. Well, she is the subject and had is the verb, so it would be because she had a lot of flour. And blank She was a good neighbor. Again, she is the subject and was is the verb, so it would be because she was a good neighbor. 2 hours later, Leigh returned to Margie's house with a beautiful cake. When Margie opened the door, Leigh shouted, "Happy birthday!" Margie was very surprised and happy. Blank the nice surprise, Margie had a wonderful birthday. So what would go in the blank? It says, blank the nice surprise. There's no verb, so the answer would be because of the nice surprise. So the answer for number 8 would be because of. Now, let's turn to page 35. Page 35, it says, talk with a partner, ask and answer why questions about the problems. So the first one says, why couldn't you sleep last night? So the problem is that you couldn't sleep last night. So what would be the answer? You could say, because of my noisy neighbors. And that would be a because of phrase with a noun. Because of plus a noun, and then it's a phrase. Remember, if it has a subject and a verb following because, it's a because clause. The second example is a because clause. It says, why couldn't you make the cake? Because I didn't have any eggs. Now notice, the question asks about a problem, and when you use the word because, what follows is the reason you had the problem. It's the reason or the explanation for the problem, okay? So just remember that what follows because is an explanation or a reason. So let's look at the problems that we have in this next section, Part B, and the reasons, and see if we can make sentences and questions from each of these. So number 1 says, you couldn't sleep last night, and the reason, noisy neighbors. So what would be the question that you would ask to find out about the noisy neighbors? You would say, why couldn't you sleep last night? And the answer would be, because of the noisy neighbors. Remember, there's no subject and no verb, which would mean there'd be a clause. So that means since it's only a noun, you have to use a because of phrase. So you would say because of the noisy neighbors. Next it says part 2, you couldn't make a cake. Well, what would be the question? The question would be, why couldn't you make a cake? And the answer would be, it says didn't have any eggs. Well, didn't have is a verb, and eggs, that would be the object of the verb. So you would say, because I didn't have any eggs. Because I didn't have any eggs. And that would be a because clause. Next, it says, the neighbors couldn't lock the door. So the question would be, why couldn't the neighbors lock the door? The answer says, lock was broken. So that's a noun plus a verb, so that makes a clause. So we would say, because the lock was broken. Next it says, you couldn't change the alarm battery. The question would be, why couldn't you change the alarm battery? And the answer says, didn't have a ladder. So didn't have is a verb, and ladder is the object, so it's a verb plus a noun. So therefore, that would be a because clause. So you would say, because I didn't have a ladder. Next, the children couldn't play outside. So the question would be, why couldn't the children play outside? Next, the answer would be the rain. So how would we say that with either a phrase or a clause? What do you think it would be? the rain is just a noun. So it would be a because plus noun phrase. And you would say, because of the rain. Next, it says you couldn't come to school. So the question would be, why couldn't you come to school? And it says the answer, car had a flat tire. So you could say for an answer, because my car had a flat tire. And you would not use of, because that would be a because clause. Next, it says you couldn't buy the house. The question would be, why couldn't you buy the house? And the answer says high price. So that's just a noun. So you would say because of the high price, and you would use of. Next, you couldn't go to the party. So the question is, why couldn't you go to the party? And the answer, had to work. So that's a verb and let's see. Well, there is no noun, so it would just be because I had to work. That would be a verb and an infinitive. Next, it says, you couldn't go hiking. So the question would be, why couldn't you go hiking? And the reason it says is the bad weather. So you would say, because of the bad weather. Next, you couldn't call me. So the question would be, why couldn't you call me? And the reason is was busy. So the answer would be because I was busy. Next, it says write a sentence about each problem. For example, number 1, you could say, I couldn't sleep last night because of my noisy neighbors. For number 2, you could say, I couldn't make a cake because I didn't have any eggs. Number 4, you could say, I couldn't change the battery because I didn't have a ladder. Number 5, the children couldn't play outside because of the rain. And number 6, I couldn't come to school because my car had a flat tire. So those are some examples of sentences that you could make about section B. And then finally, in part 3, I will read what's in the blue box. It says, why did you come to this country, Shakir? And he's using a noun phrase that says, because of my children, they live here. Next question says, why do you live in your neighborhood? And that's followed with a because clause, and it says, because it's close to my job. So I hope this was a helpful video for you, and I look forward to seeing you during the next video. Have a nice day.